Hang on, Stuart.
Most definitely that would have occurred, but what we also have to remember, there's something in economics called a substitution effect. If there is scarcity of capital, that is a market signal for those not in finance to suddenly offer up finance as a form of a bank. Harley-Davidson is a financier. Quicken Software is now a financier. Target stores offer up money. Microsoft could do it. Walmart has been trying to get into banking for years, and regulators protecting the banks would not let them. You are leaving out the substitution effect.
John, if Lehman had not gone bankrupt, had not failed, somebody had moved in to buy up the very small parts of it that were left over. If that had happened, what you want to have happened, who would have paid off Lehman's counterparties? The losses would have rippled out to every major financial institution in the world, and they too would have needed to be taken over.
Did the doom and gloom that you suggest would have happened? Why didn't it happen when Barclays bought the good parts and the rest just died on the vine?
Confidence was restored after a period of panic by the imposition of TARP, the knowledge that the street was backed up by $700 billion worth of taxpayer money and a great deal more money from the Federal Reserve if they needed it.
You don't accept any of that, Professor Salerno?
No, not at all. In fact, finance is part of the problem, but they're forgetting about the real economy. That these banks are giving out loans to prop up asset prices that were pushed too high by Bernanke and Greenspan, increasing the money supply by 50% from 2001 to 2005, about $1 billion per day. These prices have to come down. And in order to come down, you have to cut off finance.
You're not a fan of what Greenspan and Bernanke have done, are you?
I think Greenspan kept interest rates way too long, for far too long, built up the money supply to extraordinary levels.
You see, Varney does have a good side to him, guys.
Thank you very much indeed. But failed to regulate. Let me just ask you this. We're about to face another bailout crisis with Fannie and Freddie and the housing market. They've got a $400 billion line of credit. They are asking for even more. The foreclosure rate rolls on and on and on. Should we now have a complete wash through, allow Fannie and Freddie to go under, walk away from $5 trillion?
Should we even be in the business of owning a Fannie and Freddie, Professor Salerno?
So are we going to get out of it with a crash in housing prices? Are we?
Yes, I think housing prices are much too high. The government has to allow them to fall. We have to allow more foreclosures. What's wrong with poor people who are waiting, saving,
I think there comes a point where a government has a responsibility and an obligation to step in. It's a very rare point when you meet it, but there is a responsibility.
Does it trouble any of you that there is no authority in the Constitution for the federal government to do any of this?
Yeah.
The government has to treat similarly situated people in a similar way.
Right.
It can't say to one company, we'll let you die, and the other will save you because you happen to be in Barney Frank's district.
Nothing in the Constitution says that people should own houses, first of all. Second of all, it is an impoverishing idea to get people stuck into a location at a time when capital is very mobile and they're stuck in a house, which means they can't move to the next opportunity because they can't sell the house. If you want to bring the economy down, you continue this process whereby we subsidize home ownership. It is anti-Adam Smith.
Should the Fed be audited? Should we know exactly to whom they made loans and what security they received and what foreign policy they're conducting?
Absolutely. The monopoly issue of money by one agency is much too dangerous not to be overseen by the elected representative of the
Before we have to bring in a physician with private health care insurance to take care of Mr. Varney, why are you apoplectic over us finding out what the Fed has really been up to?
Don't you know how politicians operate in the modern Washington? As soon as the Federal Reserve starts to do something which a couple of politicians don't like, they'll say, we're going to audit you, we're going to push you around. Do you want politicians in charge of America's financial monetary policy?
But do you want private bankers printing money out of thin air and conducting their own foreign policies?
Anything but politicians.
Central bankers are politicians.
Professor Salerno, go ahead.
Central bankers are politicians with tenure. And therefore, they're that much more dangerous. Look, we don't allow tax and spending policy to be run by a monopoly.
The last time I looked at the Constitution, it said only the Congress can coin and mint money, not a private bank creating money out of thin air by adding zeros on a ledger sheet.
I am very interested to see you in favor of Barney Frank running the Federal Reserve.
I'm not in favor of Barney Frank running the Federal Reserve. I'm not in favor of having a Federal Reserve. Hang on just a minute.
We don't need a Federal Reserve, but it's clear that Congress is empowered to coin money, regulate the value thereof. Why would you want to empower Bernanke, a walking, talking economic fallacy who doesn't have a clue clue what inflation is. I want Congress to be accountable, not just because they will pay for it in the ballot box, but because the law says they should.
You are asking for an irrational revolution. You're asking it to go back to the gold standard.
Well, now, wait a minute, Stuart. When we had the gold standard against which you stand so eloquently, from 1776 to 1913, the value of the dollar went up by 13%. From 1913 to the present, the value of the dollar went down by 92%. What happened in 1913? The Fed came in and started giving us funny money.
That's right.
Stuart.
It's all lovely and theoretical, isn't it? But
it's
we must
historically accurate.
We must deal with the situation as it is right now. We are spending up a storm.
Which you agreed with?
No, I do not.
You said you agreed with TARP. You agreed with
the stimulus plan. I never said anything about the stimulus plan. I said I agreed with TARP because it bailed out the banks. I do not agree with the stimulus plan, the $3.6 trillion record budget, the $1.1 trillion extra spending plan just approved. We have $150 billion extra in job creation. I don't approve of any of that. The year 2009 is the year of spending. The year 2010 is when the debts are added up and come due, and we're facing a crisis.
And how are we going to pay those debts when they come due next month in 2010?
It's going to be very difficult. I mean, it's going to be more printing of money.
Well, are you going to pay them with gold? Come on, let's be realistic.
If we went back to a gold standard,
you've got a massive debt.
You have a gold standard.
Go back to the gold standard.
If you have a gold standard, you cannot borrow at that rate.
Are you
because you have to raise taxes.
Hang on, Stuart. How can we pay the debt back? I'll switch gears. What happens if the Chinese stop loaning us money?
That's right.
Or what happens if they want a mortgage on Yellowstone Park the next time they loan us a few billion?
I think it's heaven if they stop lending us money.
Yeah, that'd be great.
The best thing that would be the market cleansing thing that should happen. That they'll say we will no longer fund governments. That would be brilliant for the economy.
Did I find a point of common agreement?
Yes, I'd love to see the American government put in a straitjacket so that it can no longer spend our way to catastrophe.
Here.
Spending is the ultimate tax.
And how do we stop it?
I think gold keeps governments honest. And I think that's
but that, John, is not going to happen. We're not going to go on the gold standard tomorrow morning or next year or probably the next decade. It's not going to happen. Politics.
Well, it may not happen politically. Is it not wise economically? Is it not a natural restraint on government's voracious appetite to print money and to borrow?
I can make the case for it, yes, and I can see the theoretical case for it. Unfortunately, we've got to deal with the reality as it's served up right now.
Bernanke gets reconfirmed. I guess it doesn't matter who runs the Fed. If it's not Bernanke, it might be Larry Summers. God have mercy on us.
Right. It's the institution itself. It's a monopoly, and a monopoly is inconsistent with the American Constitution.
All right. John Tamny, Professor Joe Salerno, my good buddy Stuart Varning. Always a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us. Whew. After the